Thank you very much for this opportunity, Chuck, to be with all of you today, and I hope you're all safe and you're all well. And your families are staying healthy. I apologize for the delay, and I apologize for having to do this over the phone instead of over video. For whatever reason, I could not get the link on Zoom to work. I make a joke half the time when I'm working on the Eastern Plains in my hometown that I can find 5 bars in my hometown. I just can't find 5 bars on my cell phone, so that might have been part of the challenge this morning. Yeah. I'll be quick in terms of a review of what we've seen and what I think is coming next, because I want to hear from you. I think that'll be the most valuable part of this conversation. There are 3 things that I have focused on, a lens through which I've focused all of my actions when it comes to this health emergency. The first prong, of course, is to address the health emergency itself, to flatten the curve and stop the spread of COVID-19. The second prong is to provide real assistance to real people in real time, because there are so many people who are hurting right now, who've lost their jobs, their businesses, and they're wondering how they're going to make ends meet, how they're going to get their doors back open, and we have to continue providing that level of help. And then the third prong, of course, is what we're doing to make sure we get our economy snap back and make sure that we can get it back up to its full force once again. These are not 3 things that you do one and then you get around to doing number 2 and then you get around to doing number 3. You have to do all 3 of these things at the exact same time. Address the health emergency, help people and individuals, and make sure that we are addressing the business needs as well. And so, if you look at the past several actions that we've taken, Congress has passed multiple pieces of legislation, including the CARES Act, which passed the Senate on March 25th. This addressed all 3 prongs in terms of dollars for vaccinations, medications, and help. It addressed the individual need and personal protective equipment. It addressed the additional individual needs by providing $1,200 in recovery rebates to most Americans and expanded unemployment insurance. And I know that has created some concern about how we move forward and get people into the workforce. I'm happy to discuss that. And then the third thing, of course, is the efforts to make sure that our businesses are able to stay open. And we created the Paycheck Protection Program, which has received about $349 billion in funding in the first round, an additional $310 billion in the second round. In Colorado, over $10 billion worth of funding has come through the Paycheck Protection Program. Nationally, it's kept 50 million people in their jobs, and that's a remarkable number with the remarkable numbers that we're seeing on unemployment. So it's important that we continue to make improvements to the Paycheck Protection Program. I, on April 16th, sent a letter with Governor Polis and Senator Bennett suggesting a number of changes to the Paycheck Protection Program and other support to the state and local governments, as well as some other healthcare-related requests. I'm happy to get into all of those. I just sent a letter to my colleagues as well on the Paycheck Protection Program last week, encouraging additional changes, including expanding the time frame of the Paycheck Protection Program from 8 weeks to 16 weeks. It's something that we need to see get done as quickly as possible so that it can be more beneficial to more businesses around the state of Colorado and the country. And then, going forward, I see a couple of things that we need to be addressing. First of all, we need to address the continued sort of fixes that can be made to existing programs that we've built, those technical changes to the Paycheck Protection Program, kind of a nuts and bolts approach, and then a new track that would be bigger ideas, like an infrastructure package. We have a highway bill that expires at the end of this fiscal year. We have a bill that's already come out of the Environment and Public Works Committee unanimously. We should move forward on that and get that done. We should provide unserved and underserved broadband rural areas with additional broadband support. I've got a bill to do that at no cost to the taxpayer. Provide billions of dollars into that. We can fund it through spectrum auction proceeds instead of deficit spending. And then we should provide some other Colorado-related issues, like help with the ski area permit fees and outfitters and the Great American Outdoors Act, which, again, a program that is so critical to our outdoor economy, our recreation economy, that could put $2 billion investments right away into our national parks and our national forests, maintaining roads, trails, and visitor centers, and getting people to work through that kind of a important package. Those are the big ideas that we have. I've also just yesterday announced a major initiative that Senator Josh Hawley and I are pursuing called ReHire America. This is about making sure that we're focusing on people getting back to work and getting paid. Millions and millions and millions of Americans have lost their jobs. We've seen levels of unemployment that we haven't seen in our lifetime, and we have to focus on getting them back to work and rehired. So the ReHire America focuses on salaries and wages, getting them into their job, and supporting businesses who have fixed costs that may be impossible for them to address without this kind of help. When the government says, shut down your business, stay at home, don't go to work, we have an obligation to make sure that we're getting this country back up and on its feet and running again. So there's a lot of things that I could get into, but I'm going to just stop there, pass it on to you. I think I'll end it with this. Yesterday, I was able to pass my 3-digit 988 suicide prevention hotline, a 3-digit national suicide hotline prevention line. It passed the Senate unanimously yesterday. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. You know, Colorado unfortunately loses somebody to death by suicide every 7 hours, and we know we can do better. We've seen a 47% increase in calls to our crisis lines, and 60% of the calls are related to the COVID-19 health emergency. And so the action that we can take to save lives, and Colorado unfortunately has a higher suicide rate than many other states. And so this is an important thing that we address as we acknowledge the health crisis and the toll that it's taken on those around us through suicide. So thank you so much, Chuck, for that, and to the Colorado Chamber for the chance to be on this call with you. I'm looking forward to learning from you and getting your ideas on how we can do better. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Gardner. It's Dave Tabor again, and we've got a series of questions we're going to go ahead and get started with, and I've written down a few based on your comments too. So we'll see who we get to and how quickly, but we're going to start with Barbara Walls with TriState Generation and Transmission. Barbara, you're up next.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Nice to see all your smiling faces. Hello, Senator Gardner. I wish I could see your smiling face.
I look better this way.
I don't think so. I have to tell you, we are so fortunate here in Colorado to have you in the Senate with your energy and your commitment to Colorado and helping the people in the businesses everywhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to particularly thank you for your work reaching out to the Small Business Administration recently to get co-ops covered under the PPP.
Yes, that's breaking news. Congratulations.
Yes, that was great success yesterday. Thank you so much. The question that I have for you is regarding the HEROES Act that was passed, I think, in the House. It's in a bill on the House side, and there's provisions in it that require that utilities cannot disconnect residents and small businesses for non-payment of their electric bills. I'm curious if there's similar conversation in the Senate, and if so, are you at all talking about ways to possibly compensate utilities for the lost revenue that would be associated with this? Just a little background for you. In our service territory, in our 4 states, but in Colorado in particular, some of our co-ops are losing up to 80% of their load because of the oil and gas industry. And they're really concerned about how they're going to survive. And Occidental Petroleum was one of those big ones, and they were just downgraded this morning again. And they're really struggling. So as these oil and gas operations cease, our load goes down, and we have 3 co-ops in Colorado that are really going to be in financial trouble. So this kind of just adds the layering to it that they can't disconnect for non-payment. So is there anything going on in the Senate regarding that?
Well, and thank you for the question. And yeah, I'm very excited. When the Paycheck Protection Program came out, for whatever reason, rural co-ops weren't allowed to participate in it. We got that changed yesterday. So we've been working on that for weeks now. So very glad that change occurred. The House bill, which unfortunately is a partisan bill, anything that comes out of the Senate is going to be bipartisan, and that's the way we should address this overall health emergency and do it with as quick of action as we can in a bipartisan fashion. I think if you look at the sort of what we learned in physics, I always make this comparison. In physics, we learned that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If somebody is allowed to not get paid, that means that somebody who is supposed to get paid also has a challenge. And maybe they owe dollars to the bank or to your members or to the U.S. development, rural development loan programs, those kinds of things. And so there's there's a reaction both upstream and downstream when there's a forbearance. I want to commend you and the other utilities, phone companies across the state of Colorado for trying to do everything they can to work with customers and members to make things work given the incredible challenging times that everybody is facing. So while I think there are good intentions to make sure that we are taking care of people, we have to understand that the upstream and downstream effects also cannot be ignored when you put something into law like that. So I have not seen language coming out of the Senate like that, but certainly should it do that, you can bet that I'll be talking about how that's affecting everybody in the stream, not just the person who is given the ability to forbear their monthly utility bill. So, and with Occidental's decision to shut in the wells and not go forward, that is certainly a big issue for many areas. I understand that. But yeah, and if we hear anything else on that, we'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
Barbara, thanks for your question in advance. We've got another one from Jenny Engel with Fidelity. Jenny, you're on next.
I think I'm double muted here. Okay. Hi, Senator Gardner. Thanks again for the time this morning. Really appreciate it. I know.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know you're a co-sponsor of Senator Cassidy's Direct Primary Care Enhancement Act, which allows health savings accounts, HSAs, to cover direct primary care arrangements. So facilitates things like telehealth, and we support this concept. I know this was included in the original version of the CARES Act, but I think it was ultimately taken out. So we're wondering if you think there's a chance it will be included in the next round, given obviously our current health crisis. We think it could help alleviate overcrowding at hospitals and therefore hopefully reduce people's risk of exposure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I think it is, this is a great piece of legislation. I think that it is, that it does add a lot to how we could better react and treat to something like this. We're going to continue to talk about it and see why, number one, why it was pulled out, and if we can address the concerns of why it was pulled out and then get it included. I think there are some who believe it was pulled because it wasn't directly COVID related, but obviously it has a lot of benefits for the COVID response and healthcare and what we can be doing. I mean, Colorado is a leader in direct primary care, and we need to keep that in mind as we talk about this legislation. So I think this has a lot of benefit that we ought to be pursuing and we ought to be reminding people about. So we're going to try to keep pushing this so that we can get it put back into the measures that come next.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, Brian Strand is with 10 till 2. We've got you coming up right now.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Gardner. Is there any tort reform to address the employer's liability on the horizon?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've had multiple conference meetings about the need for liability reform. John Cornyn, who is on the Senate Judiciary Committee and has been working on liability reform for a number of years in various areas, is leading this effort right now in the Senate, and we will be working on that and voting on a measure I haven't seen language yet. He is reaching out to all of our offices right now, kind of going through what we are seeing and what we're hearing in our states. And there's a federal approach on this. There should be a state approach on liability protection as well. As we work on it at the federal level, I think the states are going to have to do some things as well. We've got to address that. I think it's not just a business issue, and I think the people who may be opposed to this are going to be trying to use businesses as a reason to oppose liability reforms. This is about our public servants as well. This is about teachers who are worried they're going to get sued. It's about principals who are worried they have liability and may not be able to reopen because of it. And imagine, again, the challenges that we would have if schools weren't opening in the fall, the additional burden that would have on families who need to get to work and they can't get their child into daycare, and the challenges that poses and faces. So we need to give both confidence to businesses to open, and this is one way to do that, and help give them the roadmap for best practices, which will also be addressed by the CDC guidances and guidelines, and that can help in the liability reform efforts as well. So the more information on best practices that we can put out for varying business types is very helpful. The more certainty you can have on liability, and the more confidence we can give the American consumer in that certainty and those guidances being followed, all goes to how well and how quickly we can reopen the economy.
Thank you.
Excellent. Next, we have a question from Christine Shepard with Denver Southern Economic Development Partnership. Christine, you're up.
Thanks, Dave. Senator Gardner, thank you for all the report that you gave us on what you're working on. It's all real good stuff. I'm wondering how likely it is, in your estimation, that there will be another stimulus package, and our companies especially are wondering if another round of PPP might be included in it.
So the answer is yes, there will be another round, and I think it's important that we get that done as quickly as possible. I think if the Paycheck Protection Program, at least I believe there is still some funding remaining in the Paycheck Protection Program today. And yes, if it runs out, I believe that there would be additional dollars put into the Paycheck Protection Program. I'd actually like to see the Paycheck Protection Program expand from 2.5 times payroll to 4 times payroll. I'm working to expand the timeline from 8 weeks to 16 weeks and move the June 30th date. I'd like for people to be able to go back and reload on the funding if that's the case, because if you're in parts of Colorado or this country that have more seasonal businesses, really getting open by June 30th may not help. Because your business comes in, it still isn't up to what it would be in July and August. So we need to make sure that we're helping people through this period, regardless of their business type. So I think there will be additional dollars should it be needed, and I also think that we have to provide tailored programs and tailored dollars to businesses that are falling through the cracks. Because there may be some businesses that nothing works for, and we need to make sure that we don't lose those employees either. The key is to keep these people employed, businesses snapping back, and doors open again.
Thank you. That's great.
Very good. Thanks, everyone, so far. We've got some others teed up. I do want to make a comment and thank those of you who've asked questions so far. You've given concise background information and concise questions that helps us keep moving. So thank you. Next is my old friend Pam Ridler from the Castle Rock Chamber of Commerce. Pam.
Hi there, Dave. Good to see you. Senator Gardner, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. My question is really geared more towards Chamber of Commerce's as an organization. The chambers across the state and the country have been there supporting our local businesses. Our focus has been to be that catalyst to assist with business growth and really work in the front lines with our businesses, whether they're small businesses or larger businesses. The challenge has been that now our organizations are all seeing such detrimental causes or reductions in our revenue streams. And it's causing many organizations, many chamber organizations across the country to having to reduce their employees, having to furlough them or lay them off in general. And I want to find out whether you believe that the PPP will be offered to organizations to hopefully keep our employees still helping our local economy and our local businesses.
Yeah, no, it's an important question, and I understand the role that chambers and other organizations are playing in helping get the word out about these programs that can help save the businesses. And particularly those areas that don't have access to some of the resources that a bigger city might. It's even more critical that they have the ability to access information through the chamber to get the word out on this. So yes, PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program should include C6s. I'm fighting to make that happen. I've sent multiple letters and had multiple discussions with Secretary Mnuchin and authors of future legislation that I've worked with to get C6s and other nonprofits included in the Paycheck Protection Program. So we're going to continue to work to make that happen.
Randy Schrader with Applied Control. You ready to go?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Gardner, for taking your time to be with us today. It does feel like the Paycheck Protection Program guidelines and rules have been a bit of a moving target for us to keep up with. Is there anything that can be done to help provide us business owners with clear guidance on how to move forward?
And that is one of our biggest frustrations as well, because we need that certainty. You need that certainty. And the reason I think why there's money left in the Paycheck Protection Program today, why there's still funding in it, is because the lack of certainty coming out of the guidances, the lack of clarity over the forgiveness of the part of the loan has had a chilling effect on people's willingness to get into the program. And so we need to make sure that there is certainty, there is clarity, and that it works as Congress intended. And so they have, in the last couple of days, been better about creating some of that clarity. There was guidance this week that gave, actually, I think this is important to note. There was guidance this week that gave a good safe harbor for loans under $2 million. I think that's important to help provide that certainty. So again, it's a safe harbor for loans under $2 million, and that allows smaller businesses to get a little bit more comfort with it. But the back and forth has obviously been a problem, and we've told them that many, many times.
Thank you.
Very good. Next, we've got Doug Tisdale with RTD, a question about transportation funding. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Dave. And Chuck, thanks for putting this on. And Senator, thank you very much for being with us today. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
As you know, I'm the elected director for District H of the RTD, and I'm the immediate past chairman of the board. But I'm speaking today on the American Public Transportation Association side. I serve on that board and on the executive committee, and I chair the legislative committee there. And APTA just last week submitted a request to Congress for an additional $23.8 billion for emergency relief for transportation systems throughout the country. And I know that the HEROES Act has an element of that addresses it. It's a little different than what we had proposed, but I'm wondering, is the Senate prepared? And we thank you very much for what happened in the CARES Act. That was exceptionally important to transportation agencies across the nation. Is the Senate prepared to consider additional public transportation emergency relief going forward?
Yeah, so the CARES Act, so everybody knows, provided about $25 billion overall to transit across the country. Colorado's portion of that, I'll see if I can get that number to you as well, and specifically what Colorado got. I do anticipate
got 232 million, just so you know.
RTD itself got 232 million. Yeah, very good, very good. And so I do anticipate that we will. And the number for Colorado overall is $327 million. So that's what Colorado Transit received overall, $327 million out of that. So I do anticipate there being additional support for transit in additional phases. Most likely it would come along with the passage of the infrastructure bill. And so that's kind of where I think it would be. What that number will be, obviously, will be a point of debate as we go forward. But I think you could count on that through the infrastructure bill, like the EPW bill that comes out, that has already come out. And I can see that that transit work being a part of that solution.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks.
Very good. We've got a question from Rodney Perry with Western Sugar Cooperative. Don't know if Rodney's on. I have not seen him. Rodney, if you are, no. All right, so I'm going to ask his question. I think it's of interest to others. When will enough testing kits be available for both active cases and for antibodies, allowing employers the resource to operate?
It's a great question and something that I'm working on with Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the former administrator of the FDA. We put about $2 billion into a Shark Tank program at NIH. I just had a meeting with Dr. Francis Collins, the head of NIH, this week to develop the test and the ubiquity of tests that we need to give businesses and communities and people the certainty they need, and also to provide enough data for better public policy decisions. In March, the United States had about 1 million COVID-19 tests. That's it. The month of March, 1 million COVID-19 tests. Today, we're testing about 2 million people a week for COVID-19. By July, Abbott's rapid test, antibody test, should have over 100 million tests out the door. We need more and more. I'd like to see a level of ubiquity in these tests that every first aid kit in a house or business could have a rapid COVID-19, an antigen test in it, basically. We've got to have some technological breakthroughs to allow that to happen in an accurate fashion, and a reporting requirement that goes with it is important. And so by these dollars in investments, we're getting to that phase of ubiquity, but we need to get there as quickly as possible. You go into 7-Eleven, you keep it in your car in the glove box, and you can take a test if you're not feeling well that day, and then you don't go to work, and guess what? Nobody gets contacted by that person because they knew already, and you don't have a shutdown of that business, and so that's important. So we're working on legislation to do that. We've put $25 billion into other efforts around testing and vaccines and therapeutics, and so it's all moving as quickly as can, and we need to get this Shark Tank developed with some successes immediately, so that we can ramp up hundreds of millions of tests, so that we can get to this phase of 3 million tests a day. Quite frankly, I helped the state of Colorado get connected to 150,000 COVID-19 tests from South Korea. We've ordered more. The state of Colorado has apparently ordered more from those South Korea connections. I worked with Governor Polis 2 days ago to help get a commitment from the president for an additional 190,000 Thermo Fisher tests to the state of Colorado to get us up to around 8,000 or 9,000 tests a day in the state. And we've got to continue. I think testing is such an important part of this, and we'll have to continue.
All right. Thank you. And the questions are coming in. And let's see. The first one is from Sam Taylor. We've got you teed up. So Sam, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate that. Senator Gardner, it's good to hear from you again. Thank you for joining us and everything you do.
Thank you.
One of the things I noticed was in the CARES Act, the HEROES Act, my apologies, is aid for states and local governments. And as you know, Colorado's facing a $3 billion hole. And because of the odd interplay between Gallagher and Tabor, we may be looking at having a tax cut as we have a plummeting budget. Do you support some type of aid for states? They're a really good partner when it comes to transportation and education spending, two things that our chamber depends on to keep our educated workforce and to keep it moving.
Yes, the answer is yes, and I'll get into that here, but I want to go back to the previous question on testing too. We provided $11 billion of that $25 billion, as I mentioned, will go toward testing. Of the $25 billion for testing, $11 billion goes to the states. And of that $11 billion, by May 23rd, Colorado should be receiving about $159 million of that. So we've encouraged them to be as flexible as possible with those dollars for the state that will receive in terms of testing. So that's a big chunk. So on the state and local funding, I met with the president on Tuesday to discuss the need for flexibility in state and local funding, and to make sure that the $2.7 billion that was given to the state of Colorado from the CARES Act doesn't just stay at the state or the biggest of cities, but it also goes to all local municipalities and the state as well, so that they're able to get those dollars and to be able to use them flexibly. That was from the first $150 billion that went through the CARES Act. And then Senator Bennett, myself, and Governor Polis wrote a letter on April 16th to Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer, as well as to Secretary Mnuchin, asking for a significant additional funding for state and local governments without a population cap, and asking for flexibility in how those dollars can be used. I'll continue to fight for that. I do believe the next package will have that in it, and would strongly support that.
Excellent. Our next question is from...
And Dave, if you don't mind, I just add that. Look, I mean, obviously we're not going to be funding a state's trip to Antarctica, but there's going to be a lot of COVID-related expenses and, firefighting costs and police costs and overtime costs and other things that that are going to have to be dealt with because of COVID-19 and the shortfalls of revenue, those kinds of things because of COVID-19, and that's something that we need to focus on. Sorry about that, Dave. Go ahead.
Thank you.
All right. You're the senator. I'm just here to help. So. All right, the next question is from, whoops, it scrolled down on me. Stand by, please, everyone. The next question is from Tom Andrews about bankruptcy laws. Tom, are you available?
Yes. I have a couple of friends that are closing their restaurants. They just can't do their, support their mortgage payments or anything like that. So they're shutting down and they're claiming bankruptcy. Do you foresee any laws in the future that are going to lighten the load for that? Their credit rating is going to be shot, and their opportunity to open another business will be directly affected by that. So just as
I'm just so sorry to hear that, and it is absolutely tragic. But you bring up a reason why, and this relates to the last question as well, why it's so important that we get the public confidence back in the economy so that we can start generating business again at restaurants and sales tax revenues that our states desperately need for that local and state funding. The restaurants, hotels, travel industry hit particularly hard and immediately by COVID-19 and sheltering in place orders and distancing, and restaurants are going to see that pain for quite a while because you're not going to have full restaurants. You're going to have guidances on how many people can be filling them. So we need to make sure that we are helping. And so, gosh, in this reduced economic environment with reduced economic activity, bankruptcy is not going to help the economy, and so we need to help these businesses survive to the other side. That's my opinion. The government. Remember, this isn't a restaurant that's closing because they served bad food. This is a restaurant closing because the government said you cannot be open. Maybe you can sell food off of the curb and dine in and delivery, but if a restaurant's not set up for that to begin with, it's just very difficult for that to make ends meet. So we need to make sure that these businesses are getting through to the other side on the credit, and that's because again, these bankruptcies aren't going to help the economy. They're not going to help put people to work. We got to find a way to help. That's why, my plan, the ReHire America Act, to help put people to work, to get people employed, to help pay wages, to give grants to businesses to help get through with their fixed costs to the other side. Again, this is a government-created economic shutdown because of a health emergency that created the economic emergency. And so we have to address this. That goes back to the very three prongs that I mentioned at the first of this: addressing the health emergency, addressing the needs of individuals, and getting businesses back open. And so that's what we have to do. On their credit rating, it's something we're trying to figure out how to fix and help. I talked to one restaurant owner in Denver who was inquiring about loans, obviously because they needed them, and he shared with me his credit rating at the beginning of that process and his credit rating, 3 weeks into it, what it had done, just because of the need and search for financing that he was pursuing. We've got to figure out a way to not punish people for what their government said for them to do.
Senator, this is Dave Tabor with a follow-up question of what you just suggested. I heard an economist saying this really isn't the time to worry about whether a restaurant is going out of business because they have bad food or because of COVID-19. Is that, but I still have people wondering, are the wrong people getting funding? What's your take on that?
Well, I think if the restaurant was open, and it was getting through this, and then this hit happens. I mean, this is a creation of a health emergency that led to an economic emergency, and we have to make sure we're helping. We do have to make sure the help goes to those people who need it. That's why I support this good faith effort and language that we've been talking about to get it. I've supported efforts to help get dollars to small businesses truly in need, getting the financing options of the PPP expanded to CDFIs and CDCs so that non-traditional lenders can help, and that unserved and unbanked and underbanked individuals can have access to the financing. I've also supported an initiative to the Paycheck Protection Program that would allow the federal government, basically give them a 2-week incentive to buy the smallest of small loans first, for the smallest of small business loans first from a bank, because the bank's putting their own capital into it. The federal government then buys those with the lending facility that they have set up. And if you encourage those small business loans to be bought first, then the bank has an incentive to give loans to the very small businesses who may be suffering the most through this. And so that's just one way to create a market approach to getting help to the smallest of small businesses. But we got to figure this out and have to help. And, the person who works for a big restaurant and was washing dishes and gets laid off doesn't feel any different than the person who was working for a small restaurant and was washing dishes and get laid off. We need both of them back to work, and that's what we have to focus on.
Thank you. Next question is from Kendall Coleman about PPE. And thanks, everyone. By the way, we've only got 14 minutes left, so I appreciate everyone keeping their questions concise. We've got several more people waiting. So thanks. Go ahead, Kendall.
Thank you, Senator. My question is a secondary follow-up to Dave's question related to testing, the follow-up to that being vaccines. And obviously, now we know the next PPE shortage is here, needles and syringes. So my question is just, how does the Colorado supply look for PPE, especially to be able to deliver vaccines? And if we are low in supply, how do we ensure Colorado will be a priority for receiving this when the federal shipment comes in? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. That's why I continue to work with the governor, Governor Polis. It's why I was at the meeting with him at the White House with President Trump 2 days ago to make sure that we're meeting Colorado's needs from the stockpile and from suppliers around the country. In this case, we were talking about the 190,000 Thermo Fisher tests that we were able to secure for Colorado. In other cases, we've helped, for instance, I helped get a couple 100,000 masks into Colorado from Taiwan, and those efforts have to continue. In my conversations with the governor, he feels that they've gotten the stockpile shipments from the federal stockpile shipped around the state, and that's the work that we're doing on the PPE side. We've got several local manufacturers who are now, Manufacturers Edge has done an incredible job of this, working with manufacturers, getting several of them focused on the PPE side. For instance, in Durango, I visited a hospital there. They were buying their face shields, I think from a face shield manufacturer in Durango that's normally selling them for snowmobilers, but now they're selling them to healthcare providers. We've heard from the hemp industry that they're making cotton swabs for those kinds of needs. Obviously, we've all seen the stories about the whiskey distilleries that are making hand sanitizers. So a couple things I'm doing on the PPE front. I'd like to see the FDA create a system where you have pre-approval for a product, whether that's a device or a pharmaceutical, and the manufacturing process used to create them, have that pre-approved. So if they're making ball bearings today and you have a global health emergency, they can immediately shift their production over to a pre-approved process and product to help address that. We've got to be proactive about what vaccine delivery will look like. There was I think a news release this morning about the president's plan on a public-private partnership to try to get a vaccine out by the end of the year. We've provided billions of dollars for that vaccine production. We've got to be leveraging manufacturers as well. And there's also plans to ramp up syringe production. So that's happening.
Very good. Next is Mauricio Henderson. Mauricio, you're queued up.
Yes, thank you, Senator Gardner, for your service. In regards to the Colorado business community, what can we do to help you do your job a little bit more better?
Man, I want to tell you thank you, because the Colorado business community has stepped up, not only in terms of donations of equipment and supplies, and you're working with your customers on forbearance, whether it's a utility trying to work with a customer on their monthly bill, or just, it is remarkable to see the business community step up and to be involved in the way you have in helping us craft this legislation. On the financial services side, some of the language that allowed forbearance to occur came directly to help consumers deal with their mortgage payments and their rent. That came from Colorado financial industries. A lot of the changes we've seen to the Paycheck Protection Program have come from Colorado businesses. And so you can keep telling us, please, 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 what's working and what isn't, and what solutions would help. And we will go to bat for what you need. We've got to get this country working again. We've got to get people back on their feet. It's, I just can't do enough to make sure that America gets back, because so many people are hurting right now. So please let us know what's working, what doesn't, and how we can help.
Very good. And to extend that, Mauricio, if you do have ideas, you can reach through us at the Colorado Chamber of Commerce. We can connect you with the Senator's office. Next is Keith Mancini with a question about the HEROES Act. Keith?
Yes, thank you, Senator Gardner. We'd like to thank you for your leadership on everything during these challenging times. With respect to ideas, we were one of the, we came up with some of the ideas for the CARES Act with respect to retirement provisions. And that's where I'd like to focus on the HEROES Act.
Yes, the required minimum distribution, or the addition, or the allowing the early withdrawals, a couple of those things, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And so that's actually where I'd like to zero in on the HEROES Act. You had mentioned the HEROES Act will not likely pass the Senate because it's a partisan bill, but you do anticipate a stimulus bill will pass. Can you comment on the retirement provisions of the HEROES bill and whether you think those will have bipartisan support in a final?
Yeah, the bill was 1,850 pages long. I'm still working through it. So I'll take a look at those provisions again. And if you want to send them directly to us or send them to Dave and he can forward them to us, that would be great, so that we can take a look at them. We did work, I remember, early on in the CARES Act about some of the retirement language that we were able to put in there with your help and everything else. So thank you for that, and I'll take another look at this. I'll jump to the place where we're at in the bill review right now, and make sure that we're doing what we can to advocate for good policies. And if you could help us out with that, that'd be great.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thanks.
Good. We do have a few more openings for questions, so if you've got them, please submit them. In the meantime, I've got a question for you, Senator. In ReHire America and in ReHiring America, people have been asking me, why can't we, as a federal government or as a nation, help to get people retrained and repurposed, doing things like on virus tracing or on some of the disinfecting jobs that are coming up and so forth. How do you see the federal government's role in moving people into jobs that are needed away from those that aren't?
Well, I think that's a great point. We've talked a lot about how to use this chance to reskill people and retool what the workforce has in order to get into jobs that they need or that they have to have now that maybe some other jobs have gone away. So we've been working on a Pell Grant, for instance, trying to allow it to go toward not just a university approach, but also toward apprenticeship type programs or to industry approved programs to get them into it. Obviously, there's going to be a need for the public health side of things on the contact tracing and some of the other work that's being done. That is a possibility. Making sure that we have local workforce needs met, that are meeting the needs of local workforce, to allow dollars to go toward them to meet the market need, not just in a vacuum. I think that's important. John Hopkins, I've been told, has a 5-hour free course to get a contact tracer certification. So that's Johns Hopkins. So those kinds of things are out there and starting to move. and are certainly going to be needed.
Very good. Thank you. Next question is from Paul Poister of Nutrien. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Dave. And Senator, thank you very much for joining us today and for all you've been doing throughout the COVID-19 crisis. I wanted to first say thanks for adjusting the SBA lending programs to make those funds available to farmers and ranchers. Do you see any additional assistance coming to assist Colorado's agriculture?
It's a great question. So yeah, a couple things on that front. I mean, obviously, when the Paycheck Protection Program came out, it was very limiting to agriculture, and so we were able to get it opened up. And then we still had the challenge of a sole proprietor or partnership and how a draw could be counted towards salaries. We got that fixed up, I believe. We're now trying to allow the Paycheck Protection Program to count their labor, H-2A visa issues into the Paycheck Protection Program count for payroll. So that's what we're working on. We also were able to get the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program opened up for ag. In fact, right now, I think it may be limited to ag. I'd like to see that number expanded beyond the $150,000 that it is right now so that it could be a little bit more beneficial to them. We have the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program that was set up with the $25 billion that was set aside for agriculture out of the CARES Act. We've got a payment limitation that continues to be worked through that will make it less effective for Colorado producers. We need to make sure that that's right. We have the $100 million buybacks a month for vegetables, produce, dairy, and meat. So that includes lamb. You think about it, 50% of lamb production, 50% of lamb consumption is through restaurants, and their busiest times of the year happens to be right around Easter, both of which were extremely affected by COVID-19, and so we have to do that. I think we will have to put additional dollars into agriculture. I really do, and I am committed to doing that, especially if we get the payment limitation language right. We'll have to have more dollars to it, but that's the only way we're going to keep these ag producers afloat. We have a very challenging situation right now where you have the packers are making money per head and the cattlemen are losing money per head. And so this is something that I've talked to Dr. Pritchett at Colorado State University with, trying to figure out a solution forward and making sure that we don't lose our ag communities. I can't imagine a world where we're reliant on China for 70% of our food like we are for our pharmaceuticals. You would have a catastrophe. I mean, we shouldn't be reliant 70% on China for our life-saving medication. That's got to change. But it would even be more catastrophic if we weren't able to feed this country with American producers. So we have to make sure that they are surviving and thriving well beyond this.
Very good. We've got Steve Kinsley from Kinsley Meetings. And Cynthia, can you unmute Steve, please? Or let me see if I can do that quickly there. I got it. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Dave. Senator, nice to talk to you again.
Good talking to you. Thank you.
I own a company in the meeting and convention sector of the hospitality and tourism industry, and that sector seems to be getting hurt worse than any other sector right now, from what I can tell. I'm concerned. I got a note today from another one of my hotel suppliers that they've been laid off permanently and lost their job. I'm concerned about the job losses in that sector and what we might be able to do to help those people.
Yeah, and it is again the sort of the catastrophic economic impact on those types of businesses: tourism, recreation, travel, hotels, restaurants, just immediately impacted. And so, a couple things. We've been working with the U.S. Travel Association to come up with some help for our travel industry and hotels, additional to what we have. Been working with the American Hotel Lodging Association and the Colorado Hotel Lodging Association to find some solutions that work there. I'll give you an example on just a convention example, since that's the business that you're in. Colorado Springs, the Space Symposium, which had to be scrapped this year, the city of Colorado Springs alone will lose $5 million in revenue, both through, I think, sales tax and probably occupancy taxes because of that one convention. But you just think about what that means. It means the hotels aren't filled, the restaurants aren't filled. It also means that, the businesses, the deals that get made and the connections made at that Space Symposium aren't going to happen. But it's also an example of why bankruptcy doesn't solve the problem, because nobody can run that business profitably right now. It's not like, well, if you just had a different management company at the hotel, everything would be okay, or if you had a different convention manager, everything would be all right. We got to get these businesses through this period. Demand will come back. We've got to build the confidence for that, and we have to make sure that we can get through this to make that happen. But we're also looking at. I'll give you an example that I think is something, and I mentioned it earlier, on sort of a tailored approach and tailored helping. If you look at Durango, Colorado, and the railroad, the Durango-Silverton narrow gauge railroad there, if you look at that tourism draw, a huge percentage of people who come into the area come because of that train. And if it's not running, then those people don't go to hotels and they don't go to restaurants. And so how do we make sure that we have tailored help to big draws in an area? Maybe it's a national park, maybe it's a narrow gauge railroad, are able to function so that you can bring people back as well. Those are all things on the travel side and hotel side that we continue to look at.
Thank you.
Very good. It's just 11:30 right now, and I'm tempted to just end us because we're supposed to end right at 11:30. But since the senator was pretty quick in that last one, Tom Andrews, if you can ask your question quickly, and the senator can make some quick remarks, that'd be great. Tom?
I've got some customers that would really like some preventative cleaning, but they can't afford the cost. Is there any help that they can file for, since it's not an insurance claim? They filed with their insurance for a claim and they can't get coverage.
Yeah, very interesting. So a couple of things. The insurance question reminds me of something else that I'll briefly touch on. We need to have a solution on business interruption and business continuation insurance during a global pandemic. Perhaps we need to look at a model like the terrorism reinsurance program to make this happen, to get those dollars into the economy and off the sidelines. That's a reinsurance program that we'd have to look at. Directly on your question, we had talked about restaurants and the Paycheck Protection Program being able to be used for things like buying and purchasing the food inventory that they need to reopen. Perhaps that's an example like the restaurant version of getting food to pre-open, pre-purchase food to reopen. The sanitizing activities that you're talking about in order to reopen. Maybe that's something that we could look at and see how that could actually, maybe it already is covered by the Paycheck Protection Program and how it could be. So if you want to, maybe we could follow up with you. On the sort of the ReHire America Act that I've been talking about, it does give incentives for that type of activity. And so if we get that bill passed, that would be another solution to what you're talking about.
Very good. Thanks, Tom, for your question. And it's time for us to wrap up. I want to thank Senator Gardner. We've got Colorado's President, Chuck Berry. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks to Senator Gardner's team and to the Colorado Chamber team, and of course to all of you who came and participated. Thanks for your interest and thanks for supporting the Colorado Chamber of Commerce. We'll wrap up right here.